The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi everybody, welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Today we're speaking with Margaret Martin, who is a physiotherapist, personal trainer, strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, and an expert in osteoporosis exercise. Margaret is the author of 3 books, Exercise for Better Bones, Yoga for Better Health, and Strengthen Your Core. So Margaret, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rebecca. Very excited to be here.
So what inspired you to write about osteoporosis and bone health?
Well, I had been a physiotherapist for 22 years before I even started talking and writing about bone health. And it dawned on me that in my 22 years, whether it was working in stroke rehabilitation, in pediatrics, in post-surgery, burns, all of those areas that I would focus on the actual, the physical needs that the client had, they all had a skeleton that we were forgetting about. And when I started putting it all together and then with myself getting older and seeing my parents' age and my in-laws' age, I was like, wow, we really need to focus on bone health so much more. And I realized there was a big gap in the knowledge between what we needed to do and what we were doing.
Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, when people, especially women of a certain age come and see me, all they know that they can do for themselves is take calcium. And they feel really limited because that's usually not going to get them where they want to be with their bone health. And their doctors don't, they offer medication and then they don't say anything else. And, I've been aware that physiotherapists can help bone health, but it's actually hard for people to find somebody that has that knowledge. So I'm really thankful that your books exist now. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually found that it was hard to find other physiotherapists that were knowledgeable as well. So I did develop a course for physiotherapists and kinesiologists and other health professionals. And so that 2-day course actually was taking up a lot of my time, so it's now available online and is taught that way. But spreading the word was so very important in the launching of Milio Guide and the program and the books.
So can you just let us know what osteoporosis is and what this means that you're doing this work for it?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially early on in the talk, because oftentimes I'll have people go, I was told I have osteo. And I'll go, is it osteoporosis or osteoarthritis? And often they don't know. They'll remember part of the conversation with their physician. And so there are 2 very different conditions. And the osteoarthritis, just to get that out of the way, is something that affects the joints. But the osteoporosis is the bones, the osteo part, but the porosity is that they are less dense. And so it's a combination of the density of the bone, but also a lower quality of bone that then makes somebody susceptible to a fracture. So individuals, then get that diagnosis and become more concerned because they are at a higher risk of fractures.
Well, and I think, we're all aware of this as we get older. You can fall and break a hip. But I think most people don't think about that until they're in that situation or they have a parent in that situation.
I agree. And unfortunately, the the book and my website were really designed for people that are younger than the people that most, Osteoporosis Canada or the IOF, or, they're often targeting the elderly. But our bone health starts, in utero. And so it's the education for our children and our grandchildren, and how we could, change the health of somebody's bones throughout their whole life if we could just target it throughout their whole life. So I often think that people, when making choices, they have to make the choices nutritionally and exercise, and not just in terms of, is this going to let me, achieve, the race I want to do, but how is this impacting my bones? I know that's a deep thought for a lot of people, but I would love the world to be thinking about, what is this doing for my bones? I love to swim, but, do I need to be swimming 5 days a week? Because what is that doing on my bone health? And one of my youngest clients was 18 years old, and she already had 3 fractures of her spine that was not diagnosed until her mom pulled me into the situation, just saying, she's been seeing this personal trainer, and she just her back pain keeps getting worse. And, from looking at her posture right away, and taking her history, she had some developmental issues that would have been a red flag for somebody in terms of bone health development. And sure enough, it had already at the age of 18 affected her bones, which was really quite tragic. So,
that's pretty young to be affected by bone health. Who is usually affected once they're, I guess, diagnosed? We all have bones and they can be affected, but what is the most common demographic?
Well, probably the most common, I'd have to say, is women as they're entering menopause, and then through and post-menopausal, because of the lack of estrogen or the decline of estrogen and progesterone, has a significant impact on our bones. And then Caucasian women are more affected. But there's a huge demographic that, often men will, kind of poo-poo the whole thing and go, well, I'm not affected. But, they have hormonal issues as well. And the general population, this next population coming up, my children, who are in their 20s, I'm so concerned about them, and then the next generation that are just spending so much time sitting and not developing, their spinal health, and just, getting that weight bearing. We used to walk a little bit more than we do now, and all that weight bearing was actually really significant at protecting our bones.
So, how does somebody go about getting diagnosed with an issue with osteoporosis? Yes.
So the pure diagnosis that is used in North America and pretty much most of the world is a DEXA. So the DEXA test has somebody lying on a table. It's painless. There's very little radiation exposure. There's hip and their spine, their lumbar spine or lower spine is scanned. And those 2 areas are chosen because there's a significant amount of trabecular bone or soft bone, which tends to have a better reading because it's a type of bone in our body that turns over faster. So if there's something positive on our bones, we're going to read it faster in the trabecular bone than we would in the cortical bone or the hard bone. So the DEXA is really the gold standard for diagnosis. But occasionally at a health fair or in some areas of the country, both in the U.S. and Canada, if a DEXA is not available, they'll sometimes do an ultrasound of the heel. So that's officially not a diagnosis, but it could maybe move somebody up the list to get a DEXA.
Okay, so you spoke about the generation coming up that are sitting more. How is that an issue for our bones?
Well, we know that there's 2 key elements involved in movement that are important for bones. So we often will hear that we need to do more weight bearing and we need to do more strength training. And so the weight bearing part, my 22-year-old, I can maybe get him to go for a walk with me. But he fortunately took a place where he's like a 10-minute walk to work. But he won't go for a walk just for the sake of going for a walk. I remember as kids we would just go for a walk because, well, there wasn't much else to do, and we'd just go for a long walk and chat with our friends. But that doesn't happen a lot very much in North America anymore, a very seated society. And then the next thing is technology, which is just taking everybody down with them in terms of their head position and their posture and their slouchiness, and the deep postural muscles that we have that keep us upright and keep our head over our shoulders, and therefore that beautiful 11 pounds of our head that's sitting through and providing weight and stimulus for our postural muscles. Those postural muscles aren't working. I have, sometimes young people that come to see me not because of osteoporosis, but more because of either knee or hip or back or shoulder pain. But I will, assess their postural muscle strength, and it's worse than a 7-year-old. I have 70-year-olds that have much stronger postural muscle strength and know how to keep their head, over their shoulders and have for their, entire lifetime. But the next generation, it's not enforced in schools. It's not reinforced at home. They don't have the examples of their parents, sitting tall. So it's pretty sad. It's I believe going to be a big issue in the coming decades.
Well, I remember when my niece was little, my mom pointed out, look at her posture, and she sat perfectly straight, probably until she went to school.
Yeah.
And something changed there, but there wasn't a thought to it, that her spine was straight. And then, as we all get older, unless we're working on it, I think that does decline unless we're very conscious, just because of sitting at desks or everything that you just said.
Yeah, but we used to sit at desks in schools, and our teachers made us sit up straight. And I was talking to one of my clients who's a kindergarten teacher, and she says the children can't even sit in circle time without collapsing. They're like lying on their side, and they just find even sitting up in circle time really hard. Because at home, they're allowed to slouch and play on devices, even at a young age. It's so sad.
Yeah, and not as active as you said, just going for a walk or going out to play at the park. And, so you have a program. What are the 4 principles of this program?
Well, the 4 principles are really the principles that are recognized scientifically, and so they're not my principles. I just highlight them in my program. And that in order to build bone, we need to be site-specific. And when I say that if we're going to want to strengthen the bones of our spine and our upper body, we need to do loading for our spine and our upper body. If we want to strengthen our hips, we need the loading to happen at the level of the hips. So that's the first principle, that bone building is site-specific. The second of the 4 principles is that you need a high mechanical strain to affect bone health. And here as an example is I have clients that have gone either to, a community fitness class or, curves for a long time, and they'll be lifting weights but never truly challenging themselves at, their maximum level. So I'll say, well, how many weights are you, how heavy are you lifting? And they'll go, well, there's a 3-pound dumbbell or a 5-pound dumbbell, and I'll do 20 or 30 of these and 20 or 30 of those. Well, I'm glad they're exercising, and I never want to take, that away from them. But unfortunately, that's not a high enough strain rate to stimulate the bones to build. So we need to be lifting more in the range of how I wouldn't say bodybuilder, but somebody who's truly trying to build strength, so that, you might start with a weight that's, 15 repetitions allows you to fatigue, and then 12 repetitions, because you don't want to injure yourself by starting too aggressively, too fast. But eventually you want that weight to feel like, man, this is heavy, and you're lifting 8 or 10 repetitions, and your muscles are too tired to lift anymore. So that's important. Do you want to hear the next 2?
Well, let's do that when we come back for a break. I'd love to, but we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back shortly. We're talking today with Margaret Martin, and we're discussing her books, Exercise for Better Bones, Yoga for Better Bones, and Strengthen Your Core. We'll be back shortly.
Think you've seen everything there is to see in online television? Let us surprise you. Visit voiceamerica.tv today for sports, health, business, and more on demand 24/7.
Addiction can affect our relationships, our families, our home, and work lives, but most importantly, ourselves. The recovery process can do wonders in the lives of people suffering from active addiction and also for those that love them. It's not just 12-step programs, but so much more. It's learning how to live life on life's terms. If you can relate to these issues or love someone who does, start with yourself. Start by tuning in to Miracles in Recovery with host Ray Lynch, Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. Hope is in your corner.
Do you find yourself caring for people in multiple generations? Are you exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed? Instead of spending hours searching for resources and information, Dr. Merrill and her guests will provide you with practical, everyday information and solutions to help make your life easier. Tune into Caught Between Generations, Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. Is your health where you think it should be? If you're like most people, the answer is probably not. Where can you get the answers you need to get on the right track? The answers start on Occupy Health. Each week, host Dr. Susan Downs and her guest experts will answer your questions, as well as prepare you for questions you'll want to ask your health provider. You'll want to plan for your optimal health with Occupy Health. Listen Fridays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Well, Margaret, before the break, I got you started on your program, your 4 principles for better bones. Can you give us the second 2 principles?
Sure, or the last 2.
The last 2. That's fine.
So the last 2 are the weight the weight bearing part of it, and so often people are sent, to their doctors and said, well, okay, after they have their diagnosis, and the doctor says, well, you have to do weight bearing, and that's really good advice, because we know that weight bearing exercises are more important than non-weight bearing exercises. Now, that doesn't mean that standing alone is good enough. So the fact that weight bearing is the fact that your foot is striking the ground, and that vibration is going up from the ankle, through the knee to the hip, and those forces are absorbed through the bone and the muscles, and the bone responds to that weight bearing, that vibration. And so within my exercise program, I do have a suggestion of a number of cardiovascular choices that people can make based on their fracture risk. So, somebody can look at the program and they go, but I really like that elliptical. But the elliptical doesn't really build bone as much as brisk walking on a treadmill or light jogging, or, so people can start making choices and including other activities, on the weight-bearing scale that will help them with their bones. And then lastly of the four principles is that, like our brains, our bones really like to be kept on their toes, like kept sharp, and to do the exact same program all the time. I mentioned earlier, clients who go, but I've been exercising, for years. I've been going to curves or some other class that they do repetitively over and over again, which is great for their cardiovascular and probably helpful for balance and flexibility, but their bones are bored. And bones just go, well, I've done the same thing. It's not a different stimulus. And so they don't respond by building. And so that's really important for our children, too, that we've been very focused on, they have to become a good hockey player here in Canada or a good football player. And so they're put into the same, exercise or sport over and over again. But just the more we can provide variety, the better it is for everybody's bones. So I make sure that in my program that there's a lot of variety and 4 different levels as well.
So with the variety, I know some people choose elliptical because it doesn't put a lot of strain on their joints. So in your program, do you have a mix so people can choose something that's not going to, say they have osteoarthritis as well as osteoporosis? Do you have a mix so that people can choose something that won't hurt them on another angle?
Yes, absolutely. And I also am really, really careful about teaching people both in the written format, and all of my exercises are supported in a video format on my website so that people are doing their exercises with proper form, because so often even just a basic squat or getting up and down from a chair or a lunge, which is basically how we get up from the floor, if people aren't mindful of their alignment or even aware of their alignment, they can't even start to make changes that are protecting their joints. So oftentimes I'll have clients they'll say, I don't squat and I don't lunge because of my knees. But if I looked at how, if I changed their form so that they squat with good form in a way that's protective for their joints, then they are always pleasantly surprised that, wow, I can do this and I can do this pain-free. So there are options both in the strength and in the cardiovascular, but there's also a lot of education so that people can sometimes make choices that they didn't think they could make.
So how does somebody get started on this program?
Well, the lucky ones get to come and see me, but everybody else around the world, they will generally, through the purchase of the book, it's pretty self-guided. I've, had clients all over the world, which is really exciting. And sometimes they'll connect with me just for a question or two. But otherwise, the book has a link to all the exercise schedules. So depending on what level, based on an assessment that I have in the book, that they determine if they're at a beginner, active, athletic, or elite level, they can follow that schedule, and they have a choice of either a 3-day week or a 6-day week program where they can, gradually over 12 weeks or however long they need to take, built into the program. And so it was written so that people could do it in a very self-guided way. I did spend 10 years in the States practicing in California, and it really struck me how the inequity of the healthcare system, so that not everybody had access to all of the experts, and a lot of people don't have the means to privately consult with individuals. So it was important for me that this book be written so that it allowed access for everybody to exercise in a way that was safe. And the program is designed so that you can use minimum equipment and out of your home, so you don't need to belong to an expensive gym or anything else.
Which I think is important, especially, when we're looking at, you said men and women are affected, especially as we get older. Everybody's affected by this. So it's something that we should all be looking into on some level, either to make sure we're just doing things properly. Like you said, changing our routine, which some people don't think about. I mean, you kind of find something you like and you keep doing that. But as you said, you need to change it, or your bones and I think other parts of your body get bored as well.
Yeah.
So in your book, you talk about breathing. How is that important for this?
Well, because there's a strong component of, the strength and the flexibility and the balance, the breathing really comes into play when we look at balance and strength. And it also is helpful with the flexibility. We all are aware, more and more, people talk about the core, but when they're thinking core, they're thinking muscles. And I'm thinking more the diaphragm, which is the largest muscle of respiration, and the pelvic floor, which is a set of muscles that are supporting us in our lowest chakra, basically between our vaginal muscles and our rectum. And so we often don't think about breathing all the way down to the bottom of our core, but it's so important that we do, and that we integrate our entire inner core with our breath. And so in the book I give examples on how to integrate that, and the importance of the breath is so that when you're balancing, you will be able to balance so much better. And when you're strength training, you will be able to lift so much heavier. So I will have clients that come to see me and they're not aware at all of their breath, and I'll test them on certain parameters, both on balance and strength. And then when I have them learn the breath and say, okay, I want you to take that full deep breath in, and as you're exhaling, to gently blow as though you're blowing the seeds off a dandelion, or you're blowing on one of those little pinwheels or the little soap wands. And if you blow through that, it often will, or just visualizing that as you're gently blowing, then you will feel a gentle tightening for women, of the vaginal floor muscles. And for men, they'll sometimes feel a gentle tightening of the muscles as though their scrotum is being pulled up. And that will then talk to the next layer of muscles, which is our deepest layer of abdominals, our transverse abdominis muscles. And all of that provides a stability that is not available in any other way. And the stability of that transversus then wraps, which is a horizontal or like a girdle muscle, providing support and stability for our low back, our lumbar spine.
That makes sense. When we're practicing the breathing now, are we doing the breathing while we're doing the exercises and the strength training?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so you know how people say don't forget to breathe. Well, so with every repetition, you should have a breath. So if you're preparing to, for instance, bicep curls is an easy one to visualize. So if your arms are down by your side with the weights, you take your breath in. And as you're starting to lift, you start to blow and exhale. And then as the weight's coming back down, you take your breath in again, so that your breath is always supporting you through each repetition.
Okay. And you mentioned balance. How is that important?
So if you're balancing without any awareness of your core, if you're fortunate and your core automatically kicks in, because for some people it will, then great. But if you're finding that your balance is off and somebody has told you that you don't have good core control, then you can try integrating the breath that I just mentioned. And in doing so, it will provide much deeper support, so that you can start to integrate. If your body starts to sway a little bit to the right, you have something linking your upper body to your lower body, and that's your deep core musculature.
So one comment that I often get when I recommend for people to take up a certain program, like say, yoga, they say, well, I can't balance, so I can't do that. What do you tell people when they say that?
Oh, I say everybody can balance. I just have to find the right level to start you at. So that's why actually I have the 4 levels in the book, because there are some very basic levels, and they start with something as simple as feet together. You're standing between 2 chairs, and you start with that. And sometimes for some clients that's really challenging. They haven't brought their feet together, really close in a long time, or they haven't done that with their eyes closed. And so you start in ways that allows somebody to always succeed, but also feel challenged, because they have to be able to hold that pose for at least 10-15 seconds, or else you're not able to teach the little receptors in your ankles and feet what to do. If you're always falling over, then it's very hard to improve on your balance.
This reminds me of the WE program for exercise, and they have you, as part of their measurement, actually stand on the balance board. And they measure your balance. And so it's how your weight is distributed between left and right, and which, of course, is bringing you to your center of gravity. And I mean, I found that interesting to do that because it's basically what you said, is being able to stand. And if your weight isn't distributed, you're going to have difficulty just standing.
Mm-hmm. And not just between your feet, but where on your foot? Whether it's, are you putting all your weight on your heel? Are you distributing it between, the front of your foot evenly? Feeling that sort of triangular base. So it's just that awareness is the start. It's just wonderful. As you mentioned, we, as a program, is kind of, I've never actually tried it myself, but it's great that they give you that awareness.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it before, because even if you go to physio or to other things, that kind of measurement isn't always done in that way where it's so visual for you. I mean, you can be assessed by somebody, but this is you basically looking at something and then trying to focus on a screen to change that as well. It's part of the program. It's been a long time since I've done it, so I hope I'm remembering it right, but it just reminded me of that and how important that was just in that part. Mm-hmm. In that program. In your book, you talk about tightening your lower tummy. Now, is this the same as what we've just been talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Because, it was, with every exercise, I'll say, inhale and exhale as you gently tighten your lower tummy. But in, the exercise tips, it's basically, you're tightening your pelvic floor, that then in turn tightens your tummy, but there's a very long sentence with every single exercise. So, anybody who has either been pregnant or have had any abdominal surgeries or have done exercises that were too aggressive for them or have had back pain, these are so many areas that can interrupt the normal reflex that we have between our pelvic floor and our deepest layer of abdominals. So it's really important, especially for the 50-plus population, to really ensure that this inner core set of muscles are functioning well. Because otherwise, the diaphragm is a top muscle. If you only do the side, bracing without any regard to the pelvic floor, then all that pressure can actually be pushed down, which is what happens, because it's going to lead to the lowest wall or the weakest wall. And that's going to enhance or possibly cause incontinence.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Margaret Martin. She is the author of 3 books, Exercise for Better Bones, Strengthening Your Core, and Yoga for Better Bones. And we'll be back shortly.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
Can grief be good for you? Absolutely. It gets your attention, helping you evaluate your choices and relationships. Your losses define who you are. Tune in each week for Good Grief with host Cheryl Jones. Our show features those who have made incredible transformations by grieving their losses. You'll learn how to find your courage and strength. You'll discover the important things in your life and how to let go of things that are less important. Good Grief airs live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern on Voice America Health and Wellness.
When a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer, it's probably the most frightening thing that's ever happened to her. Friends and family often don't know what to do for support, not to mention the patient herself. That's where Breast Friends Cancer Support Radio comes in. Join Becky Olson and Sharon Hennepin, breast cancer survivors and advocates. They help by providing inspiration, information, and most of all, hope. Tune in every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel.
Have you heard of nutritional balancing? Your body's biochemistry affects the mental, physical, and emotional aspects of your life. Many of the diseases we face are related to an imbalance of the mind, body, and spirit. Find out how to get everything back in line when you tune in to Healing Treasures of Wisdom with host Daniel Solomon. Learn how to heal yourself and your family every week. Listen Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Margaret Martin. She's the author of Exercise for Better Bones, Strengthen Your Core, and Yoga for Better Bones. Now, Margaret, in your book, you talk, or one of them, I actually can't remember which one, but you talk about exercises that are unsafe. So what are things that people, especially with osteoporosis, shouldn't be doing?
So I do talk about it in two of the books, actually, in the Exercise for Better Bones, and I do talk about unsafe yoga poses as well. So let's do a brief one on yoga in terms of hips, because the rest will focus on spine. But if somebody knows that they have osteoporosis of their hip, then I'm very weary of people doing the pigeon pose. And that is because there's so much rotation. It's a lovely pose, but not for somebody who has weakened bone. That rotation that the hip is put into, and then your body weight is put on top of that, is a lot of torque and tension for weakened bone. So usually when we break a bone with osteoporosis, it's not that one sudden move. But every time we put more torsion on a bone that isn't able to handle that torsion or that compression, well, that soft bone that we talked about, or the spongy bone, also known as trabecular bone, well, you can snap another one of the rods or cones, the little cross pieces inside, and you snap another one, And so which time of doing a pigeon pose or which forward bend, which we'll talk about, is the one that's going to cause the fracture? I don't know. Do you have 5,000 of these left to do, or do you have, 200? And so there's so many beautiful poses and so many wonderful exercises out there that we can do without, putting our bones at risk. And so the pigeon pose is one that I really discourage people to do. But there are alternatives to the pigeon pose in the Yoga for Better Bones. And insofar as the other exercises, they pretty much feel, there's many of them, but they all follow the same pattern of putting our spine in a forward slouched position. So in yoga, you'd often have a yin class where people are in forward bends and just sort of, their back is rounded. Or in an exercise class, people might be on the floor doing crunches, or they might be doing toe touches. And both of those movements, the spine is brought into a forward rounded posture, which is going to put, just the fact that we have, 11-pound heads, but the weight of the head, the weight of the shoulders, all that is loaded down on the vertebral body of our spine, and is going to be loaded more in the front of the spine, which we already know is weaker, and then it just leads to more internal cracking, and then eventually the spine cannot withstand the weight anymore, and it just compresses the vertebrae. And, today we do so much forward bending with, our, as we talked about earlier, our devices, and life just takes us there, whether it's a young parent taking care of children, or as you get older and you're spending more time cooking and spending more time in front of a TV or on your devices or on your computer. Well, I think if you're going to spend 20 minutes or an hour exercising a day, that you really should totally go in the opposite direction and get lots of extension and move away from flexion. So that would be my advice to individuals and to exercise instructors, is get out of all that forward bending and just open people up.
So by open people up, you mean by going the other direction?
Exactly, yeah.
Can you give us an example of an exercise that would be that?
Yes, certainly. So, I mean, a simple one would be, just standing and doing what we call a high mountain, reaching up, to the sky in front of you. I have so many clients that haven't brought their arms up over their head in years. And so just the simple act of reaching to the sky and then slightly behind you is a lovely way to open up and start to even be aware of the alignment of the spine. And then a really powerful exercise that not everybody is strong enough to do today, but is one that I'm wishful that everybody would build up to doing, is where they're on their stomachs with pillows underneath their pelvis and their feet stay grounded, but they're lifting their torso and lifting their arms and raising their head off the ground. And so that is a fabulous exercise that has been studied in terms of the benefit on the strength of the spine and the long-term benefits in reducing fractures of the spine. And so that's one, on the strength side of things that I really encourage people to incorporate into their lives.
So you have a book on yoga for better bones. How does yoga help our bones?
Well, when we come to the component of weight bearing, although there, because the poses that are done in standing, they do incorporate weight bearing. Insofar as strength training, the poses that are helpful are those that are done in a very more powerful manner. I will often, as a yoga instructor, see people in my classes that are in a pose, and I know it's a safe pose, but it's not beneficial for them when they're just hanging on their ligaments. So when I say that, is that they're not softening their knees or softening their elbows and using the musculature of their body to hold them in position, but rather they're locking their joints and using their ligaments to hold them in place. And so the pose can look the same, but with a trained eye, you can see which poses are helpful in terms of, wow, there's a lot of muscular activity, and I can see this helping, whereas other poses actually more harmful, especially when it comes to joint health. When it comes to the studies on bone, they're limited, compared to pure strength training studies, where there are hundreds of studies that have been done. There's really only a handful of studies, and oftentimes the participants are self-selected. So I can see the benefit of yoga, but I really discourage people from just putting, all their eggs in one basket. Just as we talked about earlier, if you're always stimulating the bone the same way, the bone's not going to respond as positively as if you mix things up.
Can you give us an example of one of the most common exercises that you give to people? Just overall, I know that you do some specific areas for osteoporosis, but what's something that most people end up doing?
Well, those that are strong enough, the exercise that I did explain to you earlier about, being on the pillows over on the floor and being able to lift your torso. Anybody that presents with low bone density of their spine or osteoporosis of their spine, that is my go-to exercise, only because it has been so well studied and, it's kind of been proven to be beneficial both short-term and long-term for individuals. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people can't get there, so we start with ways of integrating their strength in their back in simpler ways. But the next go-to exercise would be the squat. And, I know when I say squat, people go, oh, they're visualizing, 50 pounds and they're on a crossbar, over the shoulders. And when I say squat, it's simply getting from a chair to a standing position back to a chair. And having people learn to do that where they're actively keeping their spine engaged in the process and keeping their knees in a safe position so that they could eventually progress that squat in a way that will allow them to build their hips and their spine in a safe way.
So when people do your program, what changes do you see over time in their bone health and other things you're working on?
So the other things, the biggest thing is confidence. So often when people come to see me and they've been diagnosed, they almost feel paralyzed in that they feel like their bodies let them down, and like, I can't believe I've been diagnosed with osteoporosis. I've always been active. You know, I have Ironman level athletes that we know that, you know, high endurance sports is actually not good for our bones. And these people are like, but I exercise hours at a time. But unfortunately, they have not chosen the right exercises. So once they, you know, we can go through what it is, was the causing factor or factors, and they go, oh, okay, so I can be in control of this. And so just having that empowerment and that control, and then being able to have the confidence to move again, because that's really what they need to be doing, is that they need to be moving in an intelligent and safe manner. So that would be probably the biggest psycho-emotional component to doing the program. And in terms of bone density and bone quality, I don't personally test people, but I do get emails from people all over the world, which is lovely, and they'll give me changes in their bone density results. They'll give me changes in their level of function. We know that, and that's the tough thing, you know, when it comes to exercise and bone, is that when we're testing people, we're really only testing bone density. And they come to me with their bone density results. But that's just half the picture. The other half of the picture is their bone quality. And exercise affects, especially as started as an adult, exercise will affect the quality of the bone much more than it affects the density of the bone. Some studies have even shown that it almost has a reverse, not that the density changes, but the numbers don't reflect the change in the quality of the bone. And so, you know, bone quality, people then go to me and they go, well, how do I test for bone quality? And you can test for it with a PQCT machine, but peripheral quantitative computer tomography. But we will never have access, you know, as general individuals to these machines. They're used in studies, but, you know, all the studies in terms of exercise and the more recent ones where they actually look at the quality of the bone, we know that exercise has a really tangible, you know, change in bone quality, which then translates into a protective effect in terms of fracture risk.
So how long does it take for somebody to see these changes?
Well, oftentimes the studies that are done, they will find that 6 months they'll see a little bit of change, but the better studies go on for years. And so there's a group in Germany that have been working with women and you know, continually tweaking programs to see what's the best. And, you know, when people are going on for years at a time, there's significant changes. And part of the reason for the time delay is that, unlike other organs, you know, like our skin, we get a cut, and then we're like, oh, you're looking on your hand, was that my right hand or my left hand? Because you heal so fast in your skin. But in your bones, the turnover of bone is very slow. It takes 10 years for your entire skeleton to renew itself. And so, you know, in a course of a year, technically you're going to have a 10% change in your bone skeleton. And, you know, I say to people, but why worry about it? You know, how fast it changes, because if you're taking on exercise as your approach to taking care of your bones, then the impact is gradual and it's daily, but you're in it for the long run. You know, you're in it to build gradually and get stronger, and so take the time you need to make sure you enter the program safely and that it's engaging you to allow you to continue this as a lifetime approach to keeping your bones strong and keeping yourself enjoying the quality of life that you love to do.
So is there a certain age that people should be when they start thinking about their bone health and start a program like this?
Yeah, but usually they're too young to think about it. I mean, ideally as parents, you know, we should be thinking about this when, you know, as soon as they're, you know, able to take any nourishment of any sort. It starts there, and then as soon as they're crawling, and then encouraging them to move when they can move. And when I see 3-year-olds in these little strollers that are like little hammocks, and their spines compressed for hours because it's more convenient for the parent than running around after the child, it's like, oh, it's so sad. But this program is really going to challenge anybody from today, from the age of 20 onwards. I have some 50-year-olds that are able to do the athletic level, and I have 20-year-olds starting at the beginner level. So it's the whole gamut of the population.
Well, it makes sense that just like we all think about we should take our calcium for our bone health, we should be doing something like this, or at least being aware that the exercises we're doing, whether or not they're helping us or hindering us. Like you said, you've had triathletes who have bone density issues. So just to be aware if what we're doing is the right thing over time to maintain that bone health that we want.
Yeah, exactly.
So is there a way that people can get a hold of you or your program if they want more information?
Yeah, so the easiest way would be through my website. And I should explain the name of the website. So it's Melio Guide, MELIO Guide.com. And we had, several different titles for the name of this website. But, if you have anything that's related or potentially used by a pharmaceutical company, somebody's going to call you up and say, we've trademarked that. So melio means to make better, as in the word ameliorate, but there is the word meliorate. And so it's the better guide to building stronger bones and a stronger body. And so on Melio Guide, there will be a library that you can get access to my books that will take you to Amazon, and I've also just produced a DVD, so I'm very excited. That's going to be in my library and then in the upcoming month. And so that's probably the best way. There's a contact form there if they do want to get a hold of me personally. But yeah, that would be the best
perfect
way. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great show.
I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much for having me and for letting me share my passion with your listeners.
Oh, perfect. I want to thank everybody for listening today. Just be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. We'll talk more next week.